So everyone is aware that this is a recorded session with individuals who could not attend today, and so we'll be sending this link out. So good morning. My name is Daniel Gallagher, Associate Vice President for Admissions at the College of St. Rose. We are delighted to have you join this webinar sponsored by the Thelma P. Lally School of Education and the Office of Undergraduate Admissions, titled How to Help Manage Student Anxiety. As members of the guidance community, we recognize, appreciate, and value the work you do every day in supporting each student's educational journey. I know, having worked with guidance counselors for close to 30 years, that even in the best of times, resources are stretched, student to staff ratios increase, and annually you're asked to wear more hats. Now throw in a pandemic, and we have a crisis beyond what any of us could imagine. We all know the challenges, so it's not necessary to list them now. What is important to acknowledge is your attendance today. It signals to us your desire to better understand and support your students, which in turn earns our deep admiration and respect. Before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to share two changes at St. Rose that speak to our founding values. First, the college now offers the opportunity for students to interview with a member of our admissions team. These optional interviews allow students to add a voice and dimension to their application. The interview is not a one-way conversation because we set time aside afterwards for questions and answer sessions with the admissions counselor. We believe students and their families should be most informed when making this important decision. In addition, every student who successfully completes the interview and is accepted to the college will receive an additional $2,000 grant to their annual financial aid package. Second, for students who are New York State residents and have an expected family contribution of 0, their EFC equals 0, will, through a combination of federal, state, and St. Rose scholarships and grants, have no out-of-pocket expenses with regard to tuition and standard fees. This means that a commuter student with an EFC of 0 who lives at home could, in theory, graduate from St. Rose with no debt. For students living on campus, the federal loans that a student receives as part of most any financial aid package can be applied toward their room and board. This new financial aid program, called It's Possible, allows students with the most financial need the opportunity to decide on a college based on educational fit or match, as opposed to affordability. Both initiatives speak to our founding values, meeting the needs of our times, and secondly, serving our dear neighbor, making St. Rose a possibility for students who value an authentically inclusive campus with a personalized educational experience. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker for this webinar. Professor Stephen Hoff is an associate professor in the Department of School Psychology at the College of St. Rose. He brings many years of experience and a wealth of knowledge to this discussion as a licensed psychologist, professor, researcher, and educational consultant to many school districts. He has an earned doctorate from NYU and began his career as a school psychologist for the New York Public City Schools. Professor Hoff, welcome. The floor is yours.
All right, thanks. Hi, everybody. Can everybody hear me? Yes, okay. So here's where we'll start. As Dan was talking, I was thinking about the insanity of this setup. That's where my mind was, because I think we have 150 or 200 people, Jen Gish told me, on a Zoom call to talk about anxiety for students. And it's crazy. That's probably the best intro to where we're going with the topic. I was also thinking about how to say hello, because it's kind of bizarre to just talk to a computer. I can see some of you, which is very nice. A lot of people have their cameras off, so we've got squares with names, which is okay. You leave your cameras off. So here's where I just went with thinking about our hello. I went to a talk probably 15 years, no, maybe 10 years ago at Monument Mountain High School, and it was being offered by Jane Goodall. I don't know who remembers Jane Goodall, but she was one of my childhood heroes. I thought when I was growing up that I was going to be like her and go, live out in the jungle and observe animals. So she came to do a talk at Monument Mountain High School. And I was so excited. I went to the talk, and there were these overflow rooms because not everybody could get in. And what she did to start her talk was she sent out the chimp greeting to everybody in the overflow rooms. So I'm not going to suggest that we have to do the chimp greeting because I don't really know it. You probably don't either. But I'm thinking that maybe since everyone's looking at different people right now, we could all just kind of wave to say hello. Like, can people wave, like wave back to me? Okay, thanks. And to see, I already feel more connected and ready to go with our talk. Okay, very good. So let me just fill in, like Dan said, yes, I worked in the New York City public schools I'm a Queens guy. I'm a Queens native. I live up in Western Mass I got the thumbs up from Barbara. For the last 25 years, I live up in the woods in Western Mass, and I've been teaching at St. Rose for probably around 17 years. I've got the Golden Wall behind me. I'm in Jen Gish's St. Rose office right now. Go Golden Knights. So here's what I have in mind for today. Instead of you just listening to me, I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint presentation. I have a lot of resources. I have some information. I have some ideas. And we're going to kind of fly through it at a fast and furious pace. And then after that, we'll spend a few minutes on questions and answers. Okay? So let me share my screen and get this PowerPoint presentation going. All right. Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Yes, okay, great. All right, so then here we go. I'm just gonna ramble through here and start talking. I'm sorry, if we were in a class, we'd be a lot more interactive for this part of the talk, but I'm just gonna kind of roll with what I have to share with you, and then we'll talk after, okay?
Will you be sharing this PowerPoint with us?
I'd love to, as long as, Jen, can that happen? Jen, are we going to be able to share the PowerPoint with people?
Yes, I just dropped that in the chat. We're recording the session and we can also make the PowerPoint available.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so the Surgeon General just came out, I believe it was yesterday or the day before. I read an article that the Surgeon General in our country declared that we are experiencing a youth mental health crisis. And one of my colleagues who's out in the schools wrote me a text that said, duh, upon hearing that. And if we look at the numbers of what's gone on with youth mental health challenges, in that article by the Surgeon General, he talked about the fact that there have been dramatic increases in anxiety, depression, and suicide rate over the last 20 years. If you look at the last year, the rates of depression and anxiety have gone up 25% and 20% respectively. So this is a statement of the problem, right? And I just want to stress the point that the data, which of course is emerging because, you know, it takes a while for data to come out, is starting to show the scope of some of the challenges that I know that you all are experiencing every day. I don't know if anybody uses Duolingo, but Duolingo comes out with a phrase of the year. They call it the most 2019 phrase, most 2020 phrase, most 2021 phrase. They just came out with the most 2021 phrase, and it was from their Japanese language course. And what they do is they pick a theme that they think represents the pulse of the world. There's a neat German word, the word Zeitgeist, the spirit of the time. And that's what struck me when I saw this the other day. I thought about this talk that we were going to be having. The term for 2021, I am mentally exhausted. And that, I think, echoes what I've gotten back from people, not just in schools, but just in daily life, is that people are tired. The Duolingo article said that if 2020 was a year of anxiety and fear, that 2021 is really kind of turning into a year of just tiredness. So I think that kind of paints a little bit of a picture of where we are globally. I'm just putting this picture up. I know you're all in schools, but like I started in talking with you about the craziness of this situation, when I look at this picture, it makes me think of a Twilight Zone episode, that this is the daily experience of kids, not being able to see each other's faces, health mandates, all these different experiences that they're having while they're supposed to be learning is really, really hard, I think, to digest. And I think what that results in is the manifestation of anxiety and depression for a lot of kids. And if you just take a scan of the pictures here, the point that I want to stress is that anxiety and depression can look really different for different kids. It will vary depending on developmental level, sometimes gender, temperament. There's a lot of different presentations of anxiety and depression. Sometimes internalizing, sometimes externalizing. Maybe substance abuse, maybe violence, maybe school absenteeism, a whole lot of things, maybe somatic complaints, a whole lot of things that we're seeing in schools, problem behaviors, I think can really be attributed rather directly in some cases to what's going on with this pandemic. Some of the research that's coming out is starting to bear out not just kids are struggling in areas of mental health, but also that there are gaps in academics. And this is really important. With the gaps in academics come all kinds of different things, like stress with teachers, stress with parents. I was talking to a school psychologist yesterday who was actually one of my students at St. Rose. She's been out for about 5 years now in the schools. And she was pretty distraught about the number of referrals to special education. And she feels like she's kind of trying to fight this tide of kids who are being referred, because the people who are referring them see the kid is struggling and are trying to figure out what to do with the kid. Well, maybe it's a special education issue. But in special education, she was lamenting to me that the only pathway to respond to these kids in special ed is to classify them with an ED, emotionally disturbed classification. And she said that was not okay. And I agreed with her. It's not that kids are emotionally disturbed. The whole world is emotionally disturbed. And kids are carrying the brunt in school of some of the pressures that permeate the whole system. I'm probably preaching to the choir, and we'll get to some more details around that. But let me just stress one more point about this resource, which I gave you the link to. If you'll notice, it's from the Office of Civil Rights. And one of the things that's starting to be borne out in the emerging research is that the effects of COVID, mental health and academic, are not equal. There is a social inequity issue, like with most other things, around how this pandemic is playing out. And it's generally falling on lines of race, ethnicity, and some of the other factors identified. I would suggest to you that if you have interest in that, read the report. I gave you the link to it. It's a really interesting report about the state of affairs. Not to get too depressing, a little good news right off the bat. The Child Mind Institute suggests that, for kids who don't have a whole lot of high risk, they're going to come out of this well. That's really important, right? That's hope. It also highlights what I put in parentheses: for kids who have a lot of struggles, what we're seeing is that those struggles are magnified by what's going on now. Just one quick slide on the neurobiology of stress. I'm sure you've seen this. I just want to stress one piece of this, that we know that stress response, the effect of chronic anxiety and stress, affects these parts of the brain. But what I want to stress here is the functional impairment that goes with these parts of the brain, namely effect on learning, on emotion regulation and mediating the stress response, and on short and long-term memory. Think about how critical those are for success in school. So if these parts of the brain are being affected, of course, it's going to impact the kid's ability to be present and to learn. I will tell you that I share stuff like this with kids all the time. And kids like to understand what's going on in their brains. And I don't just say, hey, here's some bad news about your brain. I say, no, this makes perfect sense. And now let's talk about what we're going to do about it, which is where we're going to go in just a couple of minutes. I just bulleted out some symptoms of anxiety from a variety of sources, including the DSM. This goes back to what I said before about that picture of anxiety looking different in different kids. And I just added on at the bottom that hopelessness and suicidal thinking are not generally talked about as anxiety symptoms. Those are symptoms of depression. But even though this talk is called Helping Students Manage Their Anxiety, we know that anxiety and depression are often comorbid. They occur together, and we're not going to neatly parse out kids who are anxious from kids who are depressed. So we need to have our eyes open to both. All right, so there's a short symptom list. All right, here's the quick theory part of today's talk. This is a cute version of Urie Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory. What systems theory says or suggests is that if we're going to try to help this kid in the middle, we have to look at all the forces in the kid's life. So and forget about the micro, meso, exo. I think it's much more important to think practically about what we're talking about. It's the kid's family, their parents, their siblings, their classroom, their school, their community, their city or town, their world, and some of the peripheral factors that we'll talk to in a couple of minutes that permeate this time. So that's going to inform where we're going to go with the rest of our talk about helping kids manage anxiety. We'll start with the kid. We'll talk a little bit about parents, a little bit about teachers, a little bit about counselors, and then we'll try to bring it all together. All right, so let's talk about what kids need. So we need to ramp it up, right? We need to cram in more instruction, teach faster, give more tests, give more homework, because we've missed time. And we got to make up for those gaps that our kids have experienced, right? That's not right. We can't do that. It's not possible to do that. I mean, you'll tell me when we go to the Q&A, but efforts to ramp up and bring in new initiatives and to go harder to close gaps negates the reality that kids may not be socially, emotionally, mentally ready to go there. That's where the conversation needs to go first. And even though state ed in most states says that very explicitly in their roadmap to introduction back to instruction, it's not what's happening in schools. It's not what's happening in the schools that I work with anyway. I hope that it's happening in some of the schools you're working in. Some schools, I think, are doing better than others with paying attention to SEL curriculum right now. And here's the second theoretical piece for today. It goes with what I just said. You know, if we think about success in school, I mean, where would you say that that falls on a Maslow hierarchy? I would probably put it, you know, somewhere in the esteem range. You know, it's a higher order need for us to fill. But if folks are living in a place of needing physiological safety and security, they're not going to be there. It's not going to be accessible for them to be functioning at a higher level. We've got to pay attention to those lower level needs first. So let's shift to what kids really need. This may seem so simple, and here I am talking to seasoned counselors about what kids need, and I'm starting with a slide about sleep. It's foundational, you know, and I've looked at this with a bunch of kids. You know, I talk about sleep with kids in schools and in my private practice all the time, because if you're not sleeping, you're going to be more anxious, you're going to be more stressed, and you're not going to be as able to learn. So I think the numbers are striking. I mean, think about teens who you work with and think about your own teens if you have them. And you tell me if kids are getting 8 to 10 hours a night. I know very few who are getting that much sleep a night. We'll talk about us later, but look at the adult numbers. I don't know how you guys are doing, but it is a stretch for me to hit 7. I try hard. It's my personal goal every year is to do better with sleep. I swear it is, but it's hard. Shocking news from the National Library of Medicine that exercise is good for children. This is anxiety management. What I do in my counseling sessions these days, not even more these days, but I spend a lot of time being physical with kids. I'm on a basketball court with kids. I'm in the weight room with kids. I'm in a courtyard with kids. I am moving with kids much less than I'm sitting with kids and talking. I talk with them, you know, I have some kids, so I say, okay, now we're having men's group and we talk for 10 minutes and then we run around. That's medicine. Oh, yeah, this is my field research on exercise. That's my dog before her hike. That's my dog after her hike. Okay. Lastly, in the holy trinity of basic needs is nutrition. And it seems so simple, and it may also seem to us to be one of those things, yeah, but what kind of control do I have over that? I'll bet if we were to go through the screen, I would know that some of you have food in your office for kids. I know you do. And when I look at this picture, you know, I'm wondering, okay, we may know this, but who else needs to be helpful in making these things happen? We're going to go there in just a minute, but there's mountains of evidence that decent nutrition, healthy nutrition supports not only health, but mental health, well-being, and capacity to learn. So those 3 basics are critical. Yes, we need them. We need the parents. So are parents stressed? I mean, even that little baby is stressed in this picture. So in our role, I know that you work with parents all the time, And I just want to say the obvious, that as we're talking about kid mental health, parents are facing, tons of stressors also. Maybe economic instability, isolation, managing their kids who are managing their issues, including, distance learning, remote learning and childcare and all these other factors. So if we go back to that system slide, my point here is that to whatever extent that we can, we want to support parents and support parents' ability to support their kids. One of the handouts that I gave you a link to is a really nice kind of tip sheet for parents for things that they can do in supporting their kids. It's from the National Association of School Psychologists, and it includes these and some others, but it's kind of a little bit of a roadmap from parents about how to help their kids manage their own anxiety. So check out that handout, the one from the National Association of School Psychologists. And then you're face-to-face with parents, right? To the extent that you can, it's an opportunity for us to support parents and support their ability to support kids. I think of some of the factors that parents are managing, and I couldn't help it when I saw this slide. First of all, I love the guy's hair. And then when I read the bottom of the slide, this is written by a sibling, right? He says that my little brother played Fortnite for 7 days without a break. And I thought, that's probably true. And then I thought, okay, where's the parent? I have a 15-year-old who really likes Fortnite, so I get it. It's like trying to extract the kid from solitary to confinement to get him off the game. But the need to find balance in supervision and structure, finding routine was one of the things that we want parents to do. We want to try to help them find balance. And the pressures of going back to that system slide of games and social media are heavy. They're profound, right? To pull kids out of that world is really difficult. I'm sure that the latest of what went on with the Facebook whistleblower and what is emerging around Facebook's knowledge about how damaging some of the platforms are to the mental health of kids. But just think about that. We're talking about anxiety and depression, and we know that what's going on here is contributing to sinking kids. Where I go with this is I go to discussions with kids about social media, all the time. Like, how's that working for you? What's it like? We talk about FOMO, right? Fear of missing out, about some, strategies to reduce use. Hey, get rid of your cell phone. Yeah, fat chance, right? But it doesn't mean we can't find some insight, some ownership on the part of the kids. I have kids who have, decided that they're taking media breaks. It's like, I can't do this anymore. And I'm going to try to see what it's like to unplug, So to the extent, again, that we can make kids critical thinkers, students of their own mental health, these are very good things to do to support a child's sense of agency, rather than them being, locked into this dopamine loop of, to the point where they're hearing imaginary beeps on their phone, to get another buzz from that next source of stimulation. That's what we want our families to look like. Yeah, fat chance. Not in my house anyway. All right, let's talk about teachers a little bit. Again, we want to support kids. Kids are with teachers every day. We're with teachers every day. My first comment, God bless the teachers. The teachers are as front lines as it gets in dealing with kids. And on top of that, teachers are adults and dealing with their own sources of stress while managing the kids' sources of stress, and are showing up to work every day. You know, the folklore would tell us that teachers are exiting the field in droves. But, you know, I did some homework on that prior to this talk, and it's not true. It's not true. Some of the surveys say that a lot of teachers are thinking about leaving the field, but not that that's happened. It also tells us that sublists are invisible right now and short. This one survey from just a couple months ago talks about staff shortages as being severe or very severe. And, you know, I was thinking about that for the teachers who were there, right? If that's so, it means that the teachers who were there are managing everything that they're managing on top of the fact that there's not a lot of backup. So, and they're supposed to teach the kids high-level stuff at that higher end of the Maslow's hierarchy every day. So I think this next slide is a little clip, and I'm gonna state that there's a swear in it. So don't be shocked.
What is this job? And they say, okay, here's what we need you to do. We need you to make children know math. Wow. Do they want to know math? No, they don't want to know it. You need to make them know it against their will while they're exploding sexually and beating the shit out of each other.
Okay. Yeah. So a little teacher on a TikTok video. I actually recognize the voice of that comedian. I want a teacher played this for me. It's Jim Gaffigan. I don't know if anybody knows him, but he's a really funny guy. He's got a few kids. So anyway, right. That's what we're tasked with. That's what they're tasked with. So this survey from UC Berkeley, again, very recent. This is what teachers want. This is a national survey. This is what teachers want. And I thought, yeah, you know, that makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, and then I thought, to the extent that we can, this is what we want to try to support. And let me mention again, this circles back to supporting students with anxiety, right? If we can have teachers feeling buoyed up to the capacity that we're able, it's going to help the kids and it's going to help the teachers. So, you know, I was talking with one kid the other day in a school, and he mentioned to me, he's a high school senior, that this one math teacher who he used to battle with is now his favorite teacher and just backs him up. It just gives him a lot of support. And then I walked by that teacher when I wasn't with the kid. And I made it a point to tell the teacher what the kid said. That's an example, I think, of looking for opportunities, you know, to have teachers know what they're doing is having an effect. That's in our control to do as counselors, right? We can do that. One of my interns is out in the school. She and her supervisor, what they've been doing is leaving little chocolates with a note for teachers, you know, a couple times a day on the heels of nice things that have happened. So to the extent that we can, let's try to support the teachers, right? Which I'm sure, I know you do. All right. I just love that music. I played this in my graduate class the other night. I did a poll on which Superman song to use. One kid in my class knew this piece. And when I played the old piece, none of them knew it. So I don't know if you recognize that, but that was the theme song to Superman. So counselors, let's talk about us a little bit. You are the front lines of mental health. I mean, people go to you for mental health in the building. And that is a huge responsibility, I think, and a huge opportunity. So I want to talk a little bit about, I want to look at the counselor role from two angles. Number one, the relational lens. And I also want to look at the skills lens. And I've got some resources in here. So we'll cover both. From the relational end, just kind of give a read to that, at least the bold part of this slide. What the resiliency literature tells us, without any doubt, is that the relationship is the lifeline. It doesn't take more than that. I don't know if anyone's seen that documentary called Resilience a few years back about a pediatrician, Nadine Burke-Harris, out in California and the Child Mind Institute. It's all the latest research on resilience. And it just zeroes in on the fact that the relationship is evidence-based, science-based lifeline for kids who are struggling. I think I've known that intuitively, as probably many of you have for many years, but the science says it's so. And I find that really empowering. It means by us showing up and having connections with kids, we are, if you look at that scale, we are tipping things in the positive outcome direction. We just are. And I think that's really, really important. I gave you a link to this book. And the reason I'm mentioning it here is it's a great book about therapy from some Harvard Med guys. And any book that has a preface by the Dalai Lama is worth looking at. And the little thing I have written here, Reflections for the Helper, we have in the resource pack also. It's a little reflection that talks about the compassion that you bring to your work and the self-compassion and gratitude that can be really helpful in finding the foundation to keep doing it. So just give it a read. I just wanted to mention it here as a prompt for you to read that Reflections for the Helper that's in the handouts, okay? All right, I want to get a little bit skill focused for a minute. I picked a handful of resources that I've gotten a lot of mileage out of in using with kids. And these are all workbooks. These are not textbooks. These are not the Dalai Lama with his wisdom. These are worksheets and skill sheets to use with kids. These two resources are great. I have my students get this in my graduate program, in my mental health class. The first book is all CBT handouts. And if you can see, it's broken up within the book by presenting problem, right? So there's worksheets for trauma, ADHD, anxiety, depression, conduct. They're great. You can use them in individual counseling, with groups, really useful. And this DBT manual, I don't know how familiar you all are with dialectical behavior therapy, but DBT is another modality that includes cognitive behavioral skills and mindfulness strategies. And that workbook has sheets broken up with those DBT modules. It's also got a section called the Middle Path handouts. And those handouts are really good for helping work kid-parent challenges. It's finding that middle path between the kid and the parent. I love both those resources. This is one more. I don't know if any of you have ever seen the Coping Cat workbook. It's been around for 100 years by Phil Kendall. This is really good for younger kids, helping them deal with anxiety. Okay. Real quick, a couple more links that I gave you. These are mindfulness strategies in workbook form. The Learning to Breathe is more of a curriculum. And what I'm not suggesting is, you go back to your schools and launch a new initiative. I was the guy saying a few minutes ago, forget about that for now. What I want to let you know is that there are great skill sheets in here that you might find a lot of mileage with. with your kids, with groups, with teachers. And then finally, I want to mention this one. This may be the one to go out and buy. It's $8 on Amazon. It's a deck of cards, which is called Yoga Pretzels. I've been using them for years. My students always get them. They tell other people to buy them. These are cards that you can use with any age group that are all different breathing exercises and other such things like that. And I'm feeling a little torn now. I've got maybe another 10 minutes for us to go, and I can't see all of you, but I'm thinking maybe to run one of these cards, which would take a minute. Would that be a reasonable thing to do? Are people game to run a card? So, all right, let's do it. So here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna read this. This is the way you use these cards. You know, you would be the person, you take out the card, you show people the picture, and then you have them follow along with the instructions. And the reason I think this will be worth doing is that some of you may know about mindful breathing already. If you don't, it's something to do a little bit of homework on with some of the resources that I'm giving you. But mindful breathing is a simple, evidence-based way to reduce anxiety, to lower blood pressure, to learn to be in the mindful moment. There's tons of research emerging to support mindfulness strategies, and they're being more and more widely used in schools. So let's run this. I love this card. This is called Bear Breath. Okay, so in winter, bears hibernate in caves, sleeping peacefully. Discover your own peace and balance with this special breath. Okay, so now follow along to my instructions, okay? And I'm just going to preface this by saying when you take your breath, you want to breathe in from your belly, right? Not from your chest up here. You want to breathe in from your belly, like filling up a balloon in your belly. So here's what we're going to do. You're going to sit up tall, relax, and go inside. Put your hand on your belly if you want to. And then through your nose, breathe in for a count of 5. I'll say it real quick. You're going to breathe in for 5, hold for 3, breathe out for 5, hold for 3. So here we go. We're going to breathe into a count of 5. Ready? In through your nose. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold for 3. Breathe out for 5. Hold for 3. Breathe in for 5. Hold for 3. Out for 5. And relax. Okay. That's the idea of mindful breathing. If you know, we did that for just 2 breaths. It says here, repeat for 5 to 7 rounds. And if we were more interactive right now, I'd be asking you what that was like for you. Since I can't do that, I'll tell you what it was like for me. I felt like I was exiting a manic episode and settling down a little bit. I felt myself kind of tune into my breath and just quiet down a little bit. That's the premise of mindful breathing. It's a great thing to teach kids and to do for ourselves. So there's Yoga Pretzels. I'm going to mention Thich Nhat Hanh, Vietnamese Buddhist monk, wrote The Miracle of Mindfulness. He's the voice in that DBT module. Marsha Linehan, who developed DBT, she was a CBT scholar who became a student of Zen Buddhism. And Thich Nhat Hanh is the guy who inspired the mindfulness stuff in the DBT module. I give you a link to Thich Nhat Hanh's website, which is called Plum Village. That's in your resources. There's a lot of cool free stuff in his website, in his webpage, so check it out. And finally, I don't know if anyone has these apps. These apps are great. And I did not know this prior to calling it up for this presentation, but apparently there's free subscriptions for educators, which is crazy. I mean, I think that's a reason to go get it, just so you can check out what it is. So I gave you links to both of those in your materials. Okay. All right, so, last slide, and then we're going to shift for a minute. This last workbook is specific to managing panic attacks. It's really good. It's a CBT approach to managing panic attacks. And I don't know about you, but I've encountered increasing numbers of folks who are struggling with panic attacks. So there are some real nice strategies in here, and it's got the great metaphor of riding the wave, which is a strategy for riding out a panic attack. Interestingly, if you breathe shallow from your chest, like I told you not to, in that mindful breathing exercise, that can escalate a panic attack. So there's reasons to learn mindful breathing. Okay, so I just want to pause for 1 second, and then we're going to finish strong with our top 10 list. Just a quick review of what we just covered really quickly is that in order to help manage kid anxiety, we start with the kid, we understand the context, and then we pay attention to supporting all the forces in the kid's life: parent, teacher, us. Bringing tools to the table as we can and trying to take care of everybody along the way. So when I was thinking about how to finish here, this top 10 list that we're about to fly through, it didn't really neatly fit into one of those categories before, but these were just kind of 10 things that occurred to me to be useful and important in keeping the mindset of what helps manage anxiety in these trying times. So you ready? Here we go. Number 10, nice and easy. We're not going to sprint through the end of the pandemic. We need to kind of go nice and easy and slow and steady. Supporting kids, supporting ourselves. Number 9, I learned this one just a week ago from a science teacher in one of the schools where I go. I never heard it before. I love it. You probably heard it before, right? He said to me, be a proton. I was like, what? And he said, stay positive. I said, that's awesome. I'm going to use that. So thank you, Tim Schwartz, for be a proton. I told this to my graduate students, and one of them said, I thought that was like a dad joke, which made me feel really old. But there we go. Stay positive. By the way, the research in the world of positive psychology says that that's right. It's not just a nice thing to say. It can help improve health, well-being, and levels of happiness. Number 8, I guess we tap into our inner grit and hold strong. Right? It's nuts out there. It's good to be strong. So hold strong. Number 7, fun is good. Have some every day. Number 6, practice gratitude. I think I don't intentionally practice gratitude daily, but I think I incorporate it into my life regularly. I know people who very intentionally practice gratitude every day. And again, the positive psychology world tells us that this improves health and well-being. I just had to tell you a quick funny story. This guy, that's my youngest. He's a few years younger in his picture now, but I thought, hey, gratitude. So I'm driving him to school the other day, and I thought, let me run it. So I say, Trevor, what are you most looking forward to in school today? And he said, nothing. And I said, okay, so what are you looking most forward to? And he said, coming home. And I said, all right, well, then tell me what you're grateful for. And he said, nothing. And that was that. That was the end of it, which goes to show us that it ain't always easy, that maybe it's a matter of teaching, modeling. It wouldn't have been a good story if he was like, oh, thanks, Dad. You've helped me see the light of how I'm going to live a happy life. Not what he did at all, but that's okay. Number 5, tried and true. Here's why I think this made my list. There are some things now that we can't change. Not even the pandemic. I'm talking about being in schools. When I'm saying to you, the level of referrals is nuts, I can't stop that. When I'm saying new mandates are crazy, but the principal is launching a new initiative to teach something, I can't stop that. But if I start banging my head against the wall on that, it's not going to do me a lot of good or anybody else. So I think it's important to check the perspective while continuing to advocate and work hard to change the things that we can. I think the Serenity Prayer is on the money right now. For number 4, we go to Rudyard Kipling from The Law of the Jungle. This is great for sports. I forgot, anyone who coaches is great for sports. But the point here is that, when you think of that, the strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack. That means that I bring strength to my team. And it also means that I get strength from my team. I think that's really important for working in a school building. You got to have a team. All right, number 3, we're going to first century AD Stoic philosopher Epictetus. Why? Because he said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react that matters. Said a little bit differently, I don't know if this rings a bell to anybody, but Albert Ellis, the great Albert Ellis, who was the founder of Rationally Motive Behavior Therapy, REBT, you can listen to Albert Ellis, as a young Albert Ellis, talking about how he came up with REBT. It was inspired by this quote from Epictetus. What it means is that it's not the situation, it's what we make of it that determines our experience. I think that is so true. And Ellis talks about that as a life philosophy. What I'm suggesting here is that not only is this useful for us, but this is a great thing to teach our kids. Well, how are you thinking about that? If you think of it this way, how does it make you feel? Well, what if you think of it that way? It's like take a situation like a breakup. Somebody breaks up with you. Well, my life is over. I'm never going to meet anybody again. Well, you're going to feel really depressed. Well, what would your friend say to you? Well, maybe I'll meet somebody else. Maybe I'll meet somebody who I really love. Oh, I feel a little bit better. It's how you think about our reality. That's Epictetus, okay? Number 2, the existentialists will tell us, right? Again, spinning off that thought, every cloud has a silver lining. So we can't go see grandma over the holidays, but we're going to stay home with just us, right? Find the silver lining. That's the way that we look at things. And then number 1 on my list is the practice of self-care. And if you read underneath it, the practice of taking an active role in protecting one's own well-being and happiness. It's the active role part of self-care that I want to stretch. I think self-care's given a lot of lip service this last year. We'll just go home and do some self-care. It doesn't work like that, though. I don't think people can build practices of self-care without being really intentional about it. So we're at a little bit of a crossroads. I'm going to stop the share. Okay. So I got to look to you and to Jen. We have to make a plan. What time are we going until, Jen? I know we're going to questions. I was thinking about having us go to a 3-minute breakout room on self-care.
I think we probably need to go right into questions, just for sake of everyone's time, because we were trying to hold to 11.
And I'll
But
be,
we could stay a couple extra minutes for sure with everybody. And then if you still have questions for Steve, Steve, do you want me to drop your email in the chat and people can reach out?
sure.
Okay.
Okay, so then I think what we're doing is we're ending me talking to you there. And thanks for paying attention for me ranting for that long. And I suppose we'll open it up to whatever people want to talk about.
Folks could use the reactions button at the bottom and you can raise your hand. That way there we can see, because we have multiple screens of individuals. So if you raise a hand, then we'll be able to see you, and then you can unmute and ask your question.
I did raise my hand, if you can hear me. Okay, Steve, I just wanted to thank you. I think that your presentation was absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
I'm really looking forward to looking up the different resources, and your top 10. I was taking pictures with my phone. They're definitely reminders of what we need to keep in mind every day. And sometimes it's hard to do that, but attending something like this was extremely helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. I'll tell you, for me, just to see all of us in it together is fits for me on that. But thank you.
Do you ever present at schools?
Yeah, here and there. I live an hour away over the Mass border, so I do most of my stuff out there. But yeah, a little bit less these days. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I just think I find listening and hearing what you have to say very energizing, and I think that the faculty might too. But if you don't do that much, I might just email you and see what your availability is.
Tell me, and we'll see what we got. Sure.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Where are you, Mary?
I'm in Dutchess County,
Yeah.
so I'm about 45 minutes from the Mass border.
Yep.
Probably about an hour to Lee, Massachusetts, if that gives you an idea.
Gotcha.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Steve, we do have a question in the chat. What should I do with or for a student who is so overwhelmed with self-doubt that he lacks the confidence and ability to complete a supplement for a college and then misses the deadline to submit the application? His college list is getting shorter and shorter. Yeah,
that was a great question that I saw came in earlier via email, so I had a chance to think about it. Lucky for me. Here's the first place I went with it, with that question, is struggling with confidence, but the confidence is playing out in a way that the guy is missing deadlines, right? So I'm going to throw out this term that I talk about with my students all the time, and the term is case formulation. I'll tell you where I'm going with that. One of the things that I learned many moons ago from a presenter that I was listening to, the question was from a new clinician, and they said, if there was one thing I was going to leave this talk with, what would you want it to be? She asked the presenter, and he said, I want you to understand case formulation, which means I want you to understand why. What's going on for your client, the why of the question. So for this guy, my conversations with him would be digging into the why. What are you worried about? Tell me about your lack of self-confidence. Let's talk about it. We've got to help the guy get through that, right? He's got to work through that, because that's going to get it in his way. Even if he gets the applications in, that's going to get in his way. So if I'm his counselor, I want to help him figure out why he's lacking so much confidence. And I'm going to acknowledge that it's a crazy, insane, stressful process, especially now, so I'll empathize with him also. But then I would also, assuming that he's gonna want to apply, I would get very pragmatic around applications. And what I mean by that is calendar, timetable. I mean, are there any executive function issues with this guy? Is it avoidance? Is it time management? Does he need a setting to get things done? What kind of supports would he need to get things done differently? So I think it would be a combination of understanding his anxiety and helping him with it, and getting very pragmatic about problem solving. Those would, I think, be the two prongs that I'd want to bring to bear on helping him get the applications in.
Great, thank you. And we have some other great questions in the chat. How do you advise working with the parents, helping them to understand that children are struggling? Most think it's just great that they are in school.
Think that it's great that they're in school. What did you say?
Yes, most parents think that it's just great that they're in school.
Yeah, well, I'd agree. I think it's great they're in school too. But I would, I guess I'd want to know more about why the parent or how the parent doesn't see that the kid is struggling. If it was their kid and the kid was struggling, I try to help them see how. But if we're talking more generally, I don't know. I guess some parents aren't going to believe the kids are struggling, and that's okay, I suppose. If it's their kid, they need to understand the kid is struggling. And in that regard, I would teach, I would explain. I would say, this is what anxiety looks like. I'd help connect the dots to some of the symptoms. Some parents might say that, well, my kid's just being lazy, right? I've got a couple of parents now. My kid just isn't working hard enough. I have teachers now who say kids just aren't doing their work. But helping folks to understand why and how these factors, including a lot of the things we spoke about today, what happens to the brain, symptoms of anxiety, I would go into kind of say, hey, this is the way it plays out for kids. And then I try to shift it finally to what the parent could do to help that, if they were receptive to that. I think a little more detail, and case specific, I could probably be a little more specific on that, but.
And an offshoot of that question is, what about, how do you work with administrators and with teachers who are also business as usual and aren't acknowledging what's going on with kids?
Very difficult. I do it regularly. And that's one of those serenity prayer moments, of finding those openings to advocate, share information, capitalize on small victories. I've got this one guy who's really struggling, and we got the school principal to go along with a couple of accommodations to this guy's schedule that were way out of the norm. After the principal understanding that if we don't make this accommodations, this guy's dropping out, he's going. So I think you've got to have a team. And I'll also say, I'll throw out this term, for any kind of consulting, for any kind of team building, we've got to try to elicit buy-in, right? Buy-in's the big word. So I always look for openings for administrators to get the message. I might share an article, share some data, just to try to, and try to appeal also to the administrator's agenda, right? If it's better for the administrator, if the kid doesn't drop out, or if he doesn't have to deal with this outraged parent, I'm always looking for what card to play to promote what I think is the right agenda, while consulting with folks to try to get them to come along to seeing that. But it's hard.
And we just have one more. It's sort of a shared comment slash, ask for additional resources. Counselors saying they have a lot of students with trauma, that they're in a refugee resettlement community, 30 plus languages spoken in their school, so many layers to addressing anxiety for students. And so they're looking for more information around trauma. And additionally, the impacts would be really helpful.
Yeah, amen on that. What's interesting is that kind of my trauma-informed care, having a trauma-informed world is foundational to this talk. But much of my other work is around trauma. And let me throw out this term, complex trauma or developmental trauma, which is not in the DSM. There's nothing in the DSM that captures what you just mentioned. about kids' experiences like that. But those experiences play out in behaviors, in emotions, in thinking pervasively, right? And it requires a systemic, fully informed, trauma-informed response. I've got a ton of resources on that. And I feel really passionately about that issue. In fact, I will tell you that for many of the kids who come on the radar, I would say most of the kids with an ED classification are complex trauma kids. You know, I don't want to go too tangential, but I think that the ED classification should be banned in state and federal law, just my 2 cents. But I think that complex trauma is the big issue that underlies the struggles of so many. So yes, I'll throw some resources up in the up on the page, but I'm with you. That's the one to wrap around. Mary, you have your hand up again? Oh,
I don't think they took my hand down. Thank you.
So I think we've covered everybody, Steve.
okay, great.
Well, Steve, we want to thank you so much for all your time and attention today, and a very, very informative and a passionate discussion. So thank you so much.
All right, bless you all. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, bye-bye.